Hi, my name's Ronnie. I'm here today to tell you about my journey over the past 2 years. It's a journey that I didn't anticipate that I was about to take, and I'm using this not to brag about what I've achieved, but more to encourage you in whatever you might be going through at the moment, whatever situation you find yourself in. Just keep trying, and this is to encourage you about what is possible to achieve through your own determination and through having people around you to encourage you, support you and work with you. It started 2 years ago, May the 23rd, 2022, a day like any other. I went to work. I was a nursing sister on duty in the emergency rooms. It was a fairly busy morning, but nothing unusual. I was busy treating a patient and I thought somebody had left the brakes off the bed. It seemed to be moving, but it wasn't the bed that was moving, it was me that was moving. And I sort of slowly slithered to the floor, found myself lying on the floor, completely conscious, unable to move and get up, and I could not work out what had happened. I then was able to call for help, and somebody heard me quite quickly and came to help. This was really being in the right place at the right time. I live alone normally, and I'm single. So what better place to have a medical emergency than in the emergency rooms where all the facilities were there to help me. I quickly became a patient on a stretcher. I had a scan that was done in super quick time that then showed that I'd had a brain hemorrhage and there was a lot of swelling. They never found the cause despite numerous investigations. There was a lot of assumptions, but nothing could ever be confirmed. The symptoms that I'd got at that time was that the right side of my body was completely paralysed, my memory was very poor, and my speech was difficult. But the whole time I was very aware of what was happening. I'd got no pain, which in itself was quite miraculous. I should have had a pounding headache, no fear, and just a sense of peace. I knew that the people around me were going to help me. I was then admitted into the hospital and spent 10 days in intensive care. The very next day, when they knew that I'd stabilised and that the bleed hadn't gotten any worse, I started with my medical team that were going to be a big part of my journey that I was now starting. There was a physiotherapist, a speech therapist and an occupational therapist. All three of them were from a company called Rehab Matters that were to become a very important part of my life. After 14 days of hospital care and treatment, I was then transferred by ambulance to commence rehabilitation for a period of 6 weeks. When you first get there, you're bombarded with the team that's going to be involved in your rehabilitation. And they were very good. They wanted to know what my long-term goal was, which was to return to work. They look a little bit puzzled and they said, "You're a nurse?" "Yes." "You work in the emergency rooms?" "Yes." "And you want to go back to ER?" "Yes." You know, I don't know where else they wanted me to work, but I didn't know what I was in for at that time. And I also didn't know that the referral letter that they had received from the hospital said that I was to learn how to be independent in a wheelchair. It's probably as well that I didn't know that, and all I wanted to do was just get back to work. I then had friends visit me, and my short-term goal, we made a list, And the ones that I can remember was I wanted to wiggle my toes and move my fingers. The very next day in rehab, they got me out of the bed, which was the first time I'd been out of bed, and they tied me into a wheelchair, which was not very comfortable. You can't move very much. But the reason for that is my balance was completely gone. When these neurological events happen, it can have a big knock-on effect that even I wasn't, as a medical professional, wasn't aware of what could happen. But they quickly showed me that if I leant forward in the wheelchair, I would just carry on going forward and fall out. So I accepted the being tied in part. They then taught me how to steer the wheelchair just using my left leg and arm, which was also quite fun. Lots of bumping into people and obstacles for the first few days. And also I'm normally right-handed, so my left arm and leg doesn't get used as much as my right side. But I was then given exercises to do in bed. The occupational therapist used to play word games with me and taught me how to write with my left hand and gave me homework each day, which I was very good at and would always complete it that afternoon. I was also given memory exercises to try and improve my memory. It was mainly my short-term memory that had gone, but I also suddenly couldn't remember the passwords for my phone, for my bank accounts, and fortunately I had very good friends who came and helped and took care of that side of things for me. Always a perfectionist with my work and probably in my life as well. Everything had to be just right. Now I was able to develop a sense of humour at the stupid and clumsy things that I was doing, not knowing what my right side of body would do at any given time. After 5 days in rehab, they started me standing at the side of the bed, supported by 2 staff. It gets quite scary doing some of the things that they would ask, but knowing that they were there and would never let me fall was a big help. After 1 week, I suddenly realised I could wiggle my toes. And even that was strange because I still had no sensation at all on my right side of the body. But you had to consciously look at my toes and tell them to wiggle, and eventually they wiggled. My balance by then had improved and they were able to remove the seatbelt from the wheelchair, and I was now allowed out of my room alone in the wheelchair, and I was able to venture outside by going down the corridor into the lift. And at the bottom there was a little coffee station where we could make coffee for ourselves and get outside into the sunshine and meet with some of the other patients for a coffee and chat. And a few of us spent a lot of time out there. It was just so nice to get out of the room. At this stage they were also taking me down to group sessions of occupational therapy, when despite you thinking that you're the worst, there's always somebody worse off than you, but there are also people who have been in the same situation as you, and you can see how they've developed as well. This was always a reassurance to me to keep going and keep on doing the exercises in between the visits of all the therapists coming to see me. During my 2nd week, I was taken into the corridor in the wheelchair, and they had a balance bar that would run the length of the wall, almost like the ones the ballet dancers use. And they took the wheelchair, stood me, moved the wheelchair away, but somebody walked behind me with the wheelchair. And I would then take a few tentative steps with my left hand against the wooden bar and somebody on the right side in case I needed help. After a session in the shower in this same week with the occupational therapist, I was now allowed to shower daily, but always with somebody in attendance. and I was able to walk to the toilet with assistance also. On week 3, I was introduced to my quad walking stick, which I actually thought the therapist had finally lost it. All I was doing was managing a few tentative steps, and now they wanted me to take my whole weight on my left arm and expect me to walk. I thought at the very least I would get a walking frame, but they obviously knew my abilities better than I did, and although very shaky, I did manage to walk a few steps. By week 5, and whilst sitting outside with friends in the warm sunshine, I suddenly realised I could move my fingers for the first time. On the Monday morning, I told the occupational therapist, who was about as excited as I was, and she immediately did a force assessment and gave me some hand and arm exercises to start doing. By now, I was able to shower and wash my own hair and use the toilet unassisted, and was walking unassisted twice a day. And each day, I would push myself to walk longer down the corridor until I could walk 100 metres, which at the time was a great victory for me. During the last week of rehab, plans were now being made for my discharge home. My brother was going to be arriving from Canada on the 19th of July for 3 weeks. Initially, during this time, I had already booked a holiday for Canada, but now the leave that he had booked for my visit there came in handy, but this time he was going to have to visit me to help me at home and try and get me independent in those 3 weeks. Ramps had been made for wheelchair access at home because my legs still weren't too strong and I couldn't walk very long distances. We had got a toilet raiser put in, a chair to get me from the outside the bath to the inside of the bath, where I'd got a hand shower instead of having to sit in a bath. My friends had prepared meals for me so that my brother didn't need to worry about cooking, although he is a good cook. The discharge day arrived, my friends and brother arrived to help pack everything, and I finally said goodbye to rehab. I was excited to be going home, but also very apprehensive as to how I was going to cope once I was there. I knew that I'd got 3 weeks at home to prove that I could safely live alone, and I was determined to succeed. Each morning and afternoon I did my exercises that they had given me, and I was able to wash, shower and dress myself. I couldn't tie my shoelaces. That was the one thing that I couldn't do. And my brother, every day, I would shuffle along in my shoes with the shoelaces under and say, please can you just do the shoelaces? 2 days before he flew back to Canada, I successfully, very painstakingly managed to tie my shoelaces. I knew it was time for him to go. When he left, I was able to make simple meals, hot drinks, and more importantly, safely carrying them to where I could enjoy them. We had arranged for a domestic worker to come to me once a week, and an 8-call system that would alert the emergency services and 2 of my closest friends if I had a fall or if I got sick and needed assistance while I was at home. Things didn't always seem straightforward and easy. Some of it was trial and error, and I did have 2 nasty falls, but fortunately only got badly bruised with no long-term injuries. I then commenced outpatient rehabilitation with Rehab Matters twice a week, initially having both physio and occupational therapy. And I gradually improved, but my hand and arm were always slow to improve. They seemed to be way behind what my leg was. They kept reassuring me that this was quite normal, but I still found it extremely frustrating. I returned to my church. Initially I was going in the wheelchair as there was a road to cross. Although it was not very busy, I didn't feel confident walking across a road where the cars might be going too fast. I then started walking there, but pushing the wheelchair, as the seats in the auditorium were a little too low and I didn't yet have the arm strength to push myself up out of the chair. So I'd walk across the road pushing my wheelchair, which everybody seemed to find very funny, and then I would use the wheelchair to sit in. August 2022, and the weather's now warmer. We're heading into spring, and I took my first slow walk in the street. The next day I managed to walk around the block, and I continued walking 3 or 4 days a week, gradually increasing my distance or my speed. I now had a new goal: complete a parkrun before the end of the year. Towards the end of the year, in December, I successfully completed the Woodmead Parkrun 5 kilometre with a lot of encouragement both from my friends and the organisers there. All I did at the end was burst into tears. I could not believe from the journey that I had started that I had managed to complete a parkrun again. April 2023, 11 months since this journey first started. My very first goal was achieved, and I returned to work in the emergency rooms as the part of the work reintegration programme. Initially I began working just 4 6-hour shifts per week, but these were only during office hours with no shift work, which I was quite enjoying. As much as I'd worked weekends my whole working life, it was nice to have the weekends off. Each month the hours were increased until I was working a 42-hour week. During my first week of returning to work, I was sent to do the basic life course training, which I completed and passed. And then at the end of that week, they also sent me to do the fire training, which I also completed and passed. July 2023, I was finally able to make my trip to Canada to visit my brother exactly 1 year later, and I stayed there for 2 months. I was able to walk more frequently and for longer distance and in warm weather again. In February 2024, I retired from my nursing career at the clinic, another milestone achieved. In May, I was discharged from rehab matters, and I have now started getting myself stronger with biokinetics. What does the future hold for me? I want to find some work to do. I want to continue to improve my strength, that I can do some of the hikes that I used to so love. I want to complete the return to driving program, do another trip to Canada but for much longer, and enjoy and appreciate every moment of the life I have. So what are the take-home messages that I've got? Never give up. I was blessed that I'd surrounded myself with friends who were there to encourage me and help me if I needed it, but didn't want to take over every time if I struggled. They knew that I would ask for help if I needed it. And I know this probably frustrated them sometimes, but it was to my benefit, and I learned to do a lot of those things on my own. I know my limitations, and I've learned to accept the things that I can't do at the moment, and I will always try to do them, but I won't put myself at risk for the sake of just doing something. It's also important to listen to your therapist and realise that it really is teamwork that got me as far as I did in this journey. You can't just go for your appointments once or twice a week and expect to succeed as I did. It's important that they give you the exercises and that you do them. No matter how hard it may be, it will pay off. Every effort you put in will eventually be rewarded. I hope this helps you now on your journey, whatever it is that you're facing. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story.
Thank you so much for that, Ron. I think it's really inspiring to listen to your story and to be there throughout the whole journey, to see how you've never given up and always just so positive and so motivated. Throughout the whole 2 years of your journey, did you ever feel that you are over it and that you are just so tired and you don't want to go on, or that you feel like giving up?
I won't say I actually felt like giving up. That's not in my natural DNA. Anything that I've tackled in my life, I've always accepted the challenge and would always try. In fact, the first time I actually cried was when I did my second fall at home, and I was cross at myself for being so stupid and tripping and falling, and I was just so frustrated because I couldn't get up off the floor completely on my own. When I made my return to work, I was very anxious, and despite how rehab had prepared me for it, I didn't know if I would be the valuable member that I'd always been as part of the ER team. So when I went back to work, I was extremely apprehensive, but they seemed to all accept me when I got there. And when I started talking to the patients, I realised then that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I was able to help. I'd pick up things during the history taking and discuss it with the doctor, and they'd thank me. And I thought, no, I've not lost my touch. I can still be a valuable part of this team. Just giving up wasn't an option. I'd get frustrated, but not give up.
Perfect, thanks, Ron. And your whole story and your whole prayer life and just always believing and trusting God has been very inspiring. I think for me and a lot of people, especially sharing your story at church as well, and just being in contact with people there. How did you manage with that? Did you fight with God, or did you just know that He will come through for you?
I always knew that He would come through for me. Right from the start, God always knows what your life has got
in store
for you. And like I said, He'd put me in the right place at the right time. This could so easily have happened during a drive to work, when I would have created an accident in my own home, where I would have been alone and not had immediate help and attention. So I was in the right place at the right time. When I saw the scan a few months after this had happened, I should have had a really bad headache. I never had any pain at all. And people kept saying to me, have you got a headache? Have you got a headache? I've got no headache. So I knew that God was there. He was with me. I was never fearful, despite my medical knowledge and of how bad things could be or what could happen. I was never fearful. In fact, I've got a sense of peace all the time. That's beyond my understanding, and that is purely God and the Holy Spirit. As I became more aware and was getting a little bit stronger, it used to frustrate me that I couldn't read my Bible, and it was strange because I've never been one that's found it easy to pray for myself, and I didn't know what to pray for. Which was very strange for me, and because of the people that I'd surrounded myself with in my life and the support I got from the church, I knew that there were so many prayer warriors around me, and some of those prayer warriors extended overseas, and I was getting messages from all around the world of prayers and encouragement. So God's never left my side. He's still with me now. He's carried on. When I returned to work, I could visibly feel his presence. So the path that he chose for me and I obediently followed, it's been the right path. It really has. And I wouldn't have been able to do this without his presence in my life, I don't think.
Thank you for your time, Ron, and good luck with the journey ahead. And we are excited to see all the hikes that you're going to do and the park runs and jump maybe one day. We're going to work on that. Thank you, Ron.